Witam Państwa serdecznie, Błażej Hrabkowicz, to jest festiwal EnergaCAMERIMAGE w Toruniu, and our guest is cinematographer Peter Deming. Hello, Peter.
Hello.
Nice to see you here in Toruń.
It's nice to be here, yeah.
Of course, we're going to talk about your collaboration with David Lynch, whose spirit hangs over this festival. We celebrate David Lynch's work because of his, of course, passing this year.
Yeah.
But before we get to that, I have to ask you about one of my favorite films, which is Evil Dead 2.
Okay.
Because I love Sam Raimi. And you also did with him Drag Me to Hell, if I'm not mistaken, which I also really love. But Evil Dead 2 for me, in terms of sort of, you know, comedy, black comedy, horror genre, and the way this film is so inventive and so full of imagination, and Sam Raimi's fantastic sensibility.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about the process of making that film with Sam Raimi. What do you remember from that?
Well, it was tricky for me because I actually came in late, 2 weeks into shooting. And so I traveled on a Saturday, and then I met Sam on Sunday, and we watched a lot of footage and talked about what was coming up, and then I started shooting on Monday. So I was really thrown into the fire, but it was... and it wasn't, you know, I'd watched the first Evil Dead, which has a different tone than the second one. And I was expecting the first one. And so when we were, you know, after a few days of shooting, I was starting to wonder what was going on because it was so different. And then and then I figured it out. And then, no, it's a very complicated film, actually. And, you know, there were a lot of camera tricks, a lot of off-speed, shooting in reverse, obviously makeup effects. So
the actual makeup effects, not CGI.
Correct.
Which also I think was quite interesting, from your point of view.
I mean, there was really no choice at that point,
you
know, in time. So, no, it was great. And once Sam and I started to get comfortable together, it was just a lot of fun, a lot of adventure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you returned to working with him on Drag Me to Hell, which is also a film that I like. So I guess then maybe you knew a little bit more about the tone of the film. I guess you were a little more prepared beforehand.
Very much so. Yes.
All right.
Yes. And then we did Oz the Great and Powerful.
Yes.
After that.
Yeah. Moving to David Lynch, and your first collaboration with David Lynch was Lost Highway, or you did something before?
Well, David hired me to shoot 6 episodes of a series called On the Air.
Yeah.
Which he had shot the pilot for. And so I shot the episodes with other directors. And then we started doing commercials. And then we did a narrative. It was a 3-part series for HBO called Hotel Room.
Yes, I remember that.
So he directed 2 of those, which were narrative. And then Lost Highway. By the time we did Lost Highway, we had been working together for about 4 or 5 years.
What was the process of preparation with David Lynch? Because many actors, for example, or many of his collaborators told stories about how David Lynch would explain or not explain really his idea and what he meant to do in a movie. So what was it like to prepare sort of the visual tone and side of Lost Highway?
There's not a lot of preparation. Let me put it that way. There are some specific things we talked about, a couple of scenes in particular, one of which David knew that I needed to do some technical testing in order to achieve what he wanted. And he was very interested in the color of the film to be what he called brown. And brown now in digital color timing, you can achieve brown, but then with just photochemicals, it was very difficult. You can't, the color timers can't really color that in very effectively with RGB. So we tested some filters. We ended up using a chocolate filter, which is a little different than sepia or tobacco. It's got a little more red in it. And so he was happy with that. So we used that for a large portion of the film. And we also, in my first phone call with him about the project, he was interested in using nets on the lenses. And so we used nets, well, stockings really, on the back element of the anamorphic lenses.
Mm-hmm. And on the set, on the actual set with David Lynch, is there does the dialogue between him and you as a cinematographer look like? I also remember I go back to the actors talking about it, like Kyle MacLachlan in one interview said that after a while, after a few projects with David Lynch, Lynch would just go to him and said, Kyle, or Cale, he called him Cale, yeah. Cale, good, but a little more Elvis. And it seems absurd, but MacLachlan understood what he meant. So was that similar communication between you and David Lynch?
I would say Kyle got more out of David than I did.
All right.
Our process, by Discovery, our process was we would rehearse the scene, and then we would sit down quickly and make a shot list, which David was very involved in and very specific about.
Shot after shot, yeah?
Yes, the shots for that scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would leave the set and we would light it. And we really wouldn't talk about lighting because it was sort of implicit in the rehearsal that you watched. Mm-hmm. So you were very much feeding off of whatever the mood of the scene was that you just watched in rehearsal, because it's usually not on the page. It's usually not, his scripts don't really describe anything. They just give a setting and the dialogue. Oh. And so a lot of times you can't really read the scene, the meaning of the scene from the dialogue. It's not until David gets in there with the actors and blocks it and rehearses it that you see what's actually going on.
Mm-hmm. You also did with David Lynch, of course, Mulholland Drive, mm-hmm. and Twin Peaks: The Return. Mm-hmm. It's the third season of Twin Peaks. I'm a huge admirer of Twin Peaks in general, but as Twin Peaks: The Return, I think it's an amazing piece of work in a way that I thought that David Lynch and Mark Frost, they managed to repeat sort of a revolutionary gesture from the past. Like the first Twin Peaks was absolutely threw many of TV conventions of the time mm-hmm. away, and they did the same thing with this one. It was brilliant. So how was it for you to actually go into the Twin Peaks world and be in this world, but also in a slightly different version of it? Yeah.
Yes. Well, again, the script for The Return was not written in episodes. It was written as one giant movie. Mm-hmm. So it was about 600 pages.
Wow.
So something that large is really almost impossible to prepare ahead of time. So we prepared, then we filmed for, 3 or 4 months, and then we had Christmas break, and then we came back and we had another week of preparation and shot some more, and then we had another week. So it was little by little, but even with that breakup of the schedule, it's the only thing you could really prep were the practical considerations of location, schedule, and things like that. So creatively, most of what we talked about was he was very interested in the original elements of the original Twin Peaks, the locations, the characters, should feel very much like the original show. He wanted that to remain faithful to parts 1 and 2. And then the new material was really, we approached the same as we would on a feature film. Is that, he would rehearse it, we'd make a shot list, maybe we'd talk a little bit about the tone, mm-hmm. the lighting tone, but always sort of in generalizations like he told Kyle, right?
More Elvis.
Yes, or this scene is happy, or this scene is dark, or
Sure.
and then we would light it and come back, and if he liked it, we would shoot it.
Yeah. Was he really like consciously trying to achieve a different tone than the first two seasons? Was he explicit about that, or did it just come out practically while shooting?
It definitely came out practically, and we weren't really sure what to expect with the new material. And for most of us, I would say all of us except for David, that was a discovery of what the new material, what the tone of the new material was. Because we had shot, we started up in Washington State doing a lot of the stuff that was faithful to the first two parts. Mm-hmm. And then when we started getting into the new material, I remember the first day that Kyle showed up as, we called him Evil Cooper.
Yeah.
And
the doppelganger.
The doppelganger, yes. And that was pretty shocking to see. And so, again, we're taking it day by day. And for me, trying to figure out where we were in the big picture of the show, the only thing, obviously I'd read it, but it's impossible to remember it all, especially months later.
It was 600 pages.
Yes. So, yeah. So really, I started to lean on whatever the scene number was. Because, in a feature film, scene numbers might go up to 150, 160. Ours went up to 800. And so I'd look at the slate and say, oh, we're 625, and then sort of gauge maybe what lenses to use. I think the lighting was still based on the scene itself, but maybe it was a little more claustrophobic or whatever. But again, working from the shot list that David created when we rehearsed.
By the way, Kyle MacLachlan playing like 3 different roles from different genres, really.
Right.
One from the horror movie, one Dougie from slapstick comedy, really, and the actual Cooper.
Right.
Great achievement, I think, in acting
for sure.
on his part, and a pleasure to work with. I'm sure. Thank you, Peter, for talking to us.
Sure.
And for telling
My
all
pleasure.
these great stories. Thank you.
Thank you.